In this lesson, we're going to look at how to take green screen footage and cut the background out of it. So let me switch back to my project panel. And in that color correction folder that was provided for you, you have the ability to import either the pinch, swipe, or tap. They're just different interactions that you would use on a phone or a tablet. So I'm going to go ahead and import the pinch by dragging it into my project panel. And I'm going to make a composition out of this by dragging it down to my composition icon. So what we have here is we have a pinch in, a gap, and then a pinch out. And let me talk a little bit about the way that I set this up. So first, for the background, all I did was go to my local drugstore and pick up a piece of green construction paper and tape it to a wall outside. And then for when I was creating the interaction, let me switch back. When I was creating the interaction, I made sure to do both the pinch in and pinch out as two separate sections. And that makes it so that they're easier to break apart and use separately. So it's kind of like making two videos out of one. Okay, more of a modular approach. Now what we want to do is we are going to be cutting out this background, so all we have left is this hand. To do this, first thing we want to do is we want to kind of narrow down the area that's going to be sampled from. Because if you try to grab all this area, it's going to be much harder than if it's just the area right around the hand. So we're going to be making what's called a garbage mat. And a garbage mat is just a very simple mask that masks in the basic area that you want to green screen up from. So I'm going to select my layer. To make my mask, I'm going to grab my rectangle tool. And you want to make sure that you give it a little bit of space. So that looks good for my first interaction, but let's see how it works with my second interaction. You want to make sure you're not losing any of the hand. Looks like I'm good, but I could probably double check. Just go a little bit wider on my mask on the right, just as the hand slides out a little bit to the right. Okay, so that just means that all of this area right here, we don't have to worry about how it's going to work. Now from here, we're going to use a keying effect to pull out this green background. And typically you would do this with either a green or a blue background. And that's because a lot of times you're doing it when you are shooting people, and people tend to have not a lot of green in their skin. And they have a little bit of blue, but if they're wearing a green color, sometimes you need to switch to blue to make sure that you don't pull out greens from their clothing. Okay. So we're doing with our green. We're going to select our layer. Go up to Effect, there's a keying section, and the one we're going to be using is Keylight. This one tends to work really well when it comes free with After Effects. So select Keylight. The first thing we need to do is we need to sample the correct color. So I'm going to grab my eyedropper for screen color, and I'm going to go somewhere close to the hand, but make sure you don't click on the hand. You want to get the green part. Give it a little bit of distance, that way you don't accidentally pick up a shadow. And just from that, it's going to make a really big difference. You're really going to be able to tell that the background is gone now. There might be a few areas that could be a little bit better. Right now, I'm not really noticing anything. So it can be difficult to notice, especially if you don't have another image underneath to match it up with, especially since a lot of these might be shadows that you don't realize are showing up. And since it's a black background, the shadow is not going to show up so well. So what you can actually do is over in this View section, you can switch it from Final Result to Screen Map. And that'll give you more of like a Photoshop mask kind of look, where white shows up and black hides, and then the grays in between are kind of in between. And now we can see a lot more information over here on these sides that is going to be showing up that we don't really want to show up. It's going to end up looking like a little bit of a green box in our background. So what we can do from here is we make adjustments to our screen gain. If you just go up slightly, doesn't take a lot, just a little bit. It'll make a big difference in what gets pulled out. Still getting a little bit up in our corners, so we can probably go a little bit higher. Let me try 112. You want to also look at this area here because it's going to start pulling out these pixels as well. You don't want to have a transparent hand in here. If it's got a little bit, it may not be a big problem, just depending on your background, how colorful the background is. But this looks like an awful lot here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase or decrease my screen balance a little bit. And that's going to help even this out a bit more. Maybe even go just a little bit lower on my screen gain. And it's just kind of a push-pull relationship with this, you know. Sometimes you take away a little bit too much, sometimes you give it back a little bit too much. And depending on how well you shot your footage is going to be how easy this is to work with. That seems to be working pretty well for us. We could probably go into more depth in like our screen matte sections, but you know, for the most part, these few features tend to work really well. Once you got it looking the way you want it to, you can switch it back to final result, and you should get a nice hand pulled out from your background. Okay. So make sure to try to shoot the lighting as well as you can. Try to get your background to look evenly lit. Don't put your hand too close to your construction paper when you're doing this, otherwise it's going to create a really heavy shadow. You want to give it a little bit of distance so it doesn't pick up shadows so much. But as long as you have your background pretty evenly lit and your lighting's good on your video in general, then it should be pretty easy to use the Keylight effect to remove your background and combine videos and composite them all together.